Your doctor told you type 2 diabetes is something you manage for the rest of your life. What they didn't tell you, and what the research now confirms, is that for most people, it's reversible. If you want to predict whether someone can reverse type 2 diabetes, don't look at their medication list. Don't look at their A1C from 3 months ago. Look at how much fat is trapped inside their pancreas. Because right now, somewhere in your body, there are beta cells, the cells responsible for producing insulin, that have not actually died. They went silent. They retreated into what researchers are now calling a protected dormancy state. And what a landmark trial published in the Lancet revealed a few years ago sent shockwaves through the entire endocrinology world. When you remove the right stressor from those cells, they wake back up. They begin producing insulin again. Real insulin production in people who had been diabetic for years. One study showed 46% of participants achieved complete diabetes remission. Not improvement on medication, remission without drugs. This video is about the exact biological mechanism behind that, and the fastest, most evidence-backed way to begin activating it, starting with one single day. We go into the science. If what you just heard made you want the complete roadmap in your hands right now, not just today's steps, but every single day laid out for you, I put that together. It's called the 21-day Metabolic Reversal Protocol. The morning drink that primes your metabolism before your first meal. Every day's meals, the exact supplement stack, and a tracker. The full system for ending the siege on your pancreas. Day 1 tonight, if you want it. Scan the code you see on screen right now. And if what landed hardest just now was that one sentence, your cells were designed to self-repair, and nobody told you, then Cellular Freedom is the book that answers why. Every cellular mechanism, your mitochondria, your epigenetics, the complete hormonal picture, autophagy, all of it. The science of why your body has this capacity, explained from the root up. It's the book I wish every patient had read before they sat across from me. Same code, or find the link in the description below. Now, I need to show you something that most doctors are still getting wrong about what's happening inside a diabetic pancreas. And once you understand this, you will never see your diagnosis the same way again. Decades, the standard medical conversation around type 2 diabetes has sounded something like this. Here's your metformin, watch your carbs, come back in 3 months. The implication, sometimes spoken, often just implied, is that this is a one-way road, that once the damage is done, the best you can do is slow the progression, that your pancreas has given up, that management is the ceiling. That framing is not just incomplete. For the majority of people with type 2 diabetes, it is factually wrong. And as a physician who has spent nearly 30 years studying how the human metabolic system breaks down, and more importantly, how it repairs itself, I find the gap between what the science now demonstrates and what patients are actually being told to be one of the most consequential disconnects in modern medicine. Today, we close that gap. Hi, I'm Dr. Leana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and metabolic disease researcher. And I want to be transparent with you about something early in this video. I'm not going to tell you that a single supplement reversed someone's diabetes in a week. I am not going to offer you shortcuts dressed up in scientific language. What I am going to show you is peer-reviewed, independently replicated published science, the kind that appears in the Lancet and Diabetes Care and the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology, that demonstrates something extraordinary. The human pancreas retains a remarkable, measurable capacity to recover, and a protocol that begins activating that recovery within the first 24 hours. The mechanism is real. The timeline is real. And if you're living with type 2 diabetes or trending toward it, stay with me through this entire video, because what you learn here may completely change what you believe is possible for your health, for you go further, something quick. I regularly receive messages from viewers who tell me they've been watching these videos for months without realizing they hadn't subscribed. If that's you, and this content is genuinely helping you, it takes one click to fix that. Subscribing is free, and it's the most direct way to make sure this research reaches people who actually need it. Go ahead, I'll be right here when you're back. What everyone gets wrong about a diabetic pancreas. Let me start where almost nobody starts, with what is physically, structurally happening inside your pancreas. Most people, when they've been given a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, have been operating under one of two mental models. Either, my body doesn't make enough insulin, or my cells don't respond to the insulin I make. Both of these are partially true, but neither of them captures the complete picture. And the piece they're missing is what determines whether reversal is possible. Your pancreas contains clusters of specialized tissue called the islets of Langerhans, named after the German pathologist who discovered them in the 1800s. Inside those islets are beta cells, whose entire purpose is to monitor blood glucose and respond with precise insulin secretion. When you eat a meal, glucose rises in your blood. Your beta cells detect the change, and they release exactly as much insulin as needed to bring it back down. When the system is working, it's extraordinarily precise. Your body manages blood sugar with a level of calibration no external drug has ever fully replicated. Now, here is the part that matters. When people develop type 2 diabetes, the assumption has been that the beta cells progressively die off, and that the disease is essentially the story of a dwindling population of these cells. The research now tells us this picture is wrong. The overloaded teacher analogy. Here's a way to understand what's actually happening. Imagine you hired the most capable, dedicated teacher in the world, and you put them in a classroom with 200 students, completely alone, no support staff, no breaks, no resources, for 15 straight years. What would happen to that teacher? They wouldn't stop being a teacher. They wouldn't cease to exist, but they would shut down. They would stop performing at full capacity, not because their abilities vanished, but because the environment around them became impossible to function in. That is precisely what chronic high blood sugar does to your beta cells. The technical term for it is glucotoxicity. When beta cells are chronically exposed to elevated glucose levels, they enter a state of functional exhaustion. They downregulate the very machinery that produces insulin. They begin generating inflammatory signals that further impair their own function. And here's the piece that changed everything we thought we knew. A layer of fat, ectopic fat, the kind that accumulates in organs where it doesn't belong, begins embedding itself within pancreatic tissue, physically compressing the islets and disrupting their hormone sensing and hormone releasing functions. Think of your pancreas like an engine that's become waterlogged. The engine itself is not broken. The pistons are intact, the fuel lines are intact, but the engine is drowning. It cannot turn over, not because its components have failed, but because the environment surrounding those components has become hostile to function. The Newcastle discovery that changed everything. In 2017, researchers at Newcastle University, led by Professor Roy Taylor, published findings from the DIRECT trial, the diabetes remission clinical trial in the Lancet. They enrolled 298 adults with established type 2 diabetes, some of whom had been living with the diagnosis for up to 6 years. The intervention was structured around a single primary goal: systematically clearing the ectopic fat that had accumulated in and around the liver and pancreas. When that fat cleared, and this is the finding that the endocrinology community is still processing, beta cell function began to return. In 46% of participants, full diabetes remission was achieved, a 1C below 6.5%, no medication, normal insulin production, from cells that had, by the old model, been considered permanently impaired. This is not anecdote. This is not a fringe study. This is a randomized controlled trial in one of the most respected peer-reviewed journals in existence. Your beta cells are not dead. They are dormant, and dormancy is reversible. Now that you understand what is happening inside the pancreas, let's talk about how to change it. There are 3 distinct biological doorways through which this reversal operates. Understanding them is what separates people who see results from people who try things randomly and give up. Doorway 1, AMPK activation, the metabolic master switch. Inside nearly every cell in your body lives a molecule called AMP-activated protein kinase, AMPK for short. You can think of AMPK as your body's internal energy management system. It's like a smart thermostat that monitors how much cellular energy is available and makes real-time adjustments to how that energy is used and replenished. When AMPK is activated, something critical happens. Your muscle cells begin absorbing glucose from the blood using a mechanism that does not require insulin. Transporter proteins called GLUT4 channels migrate to the cell surface entirely on their own, pulling glucose out of circulation independently. Your blood sugar drops. Your pancreas gets a reprieve from the constant demand to produce insulin. And while it rests, it could begin to recover. Here's where it gets important. Certain foods are powerful AMPK activators. So is a specific pattern of meal timing. This means the people who understand this doorway have a concrete, specific mechanism they can begin targeting, starting with the foods they eat tomorrow morning. Metformin, the most commonly prescribed diabetes drug in the world, works primarily through AMPK activation. But AMPK can be activated through nutritional and lifestyle interventions that carry none of metformin's side effects, and in some studies, with comparable effect sizes. I'll give you the specific compounds in the protocol section. Doorway 2, pancreatic fat clearance, draining the waterlogged engine. The ectopic fat embedded in your liver and pancreas didn't accumulate in a week. But here's what the Newcastle research established. It doesn't take years to clear either. It is responsive. Within days of reducing the right dietary inputs and activating fat mobilization pathways, intrapancreatic fat begins to move. The mechanism operates in a sequence. Your liver processes and stores fat first. It fills up before the pancreas does. When you create the right metabolic conditions, the liver begins clearing its fat stores before the pancreas does. But this matters because the pancreas follows the liver. Professor Taylor calls this the twin cycle hypothesis, 2 organs locked in a shared metabolic feedback loop where the liver and pancreas each contribute to and are affected by the other's dysfunction. Interrupt the loop at the liver, and you unlock the pancreas. The specific dietary pattern that achieves this most efficiently involves reducing the inputs that drive hepatic fat storage, primarily excess fructose from processed foods and refined carbohydrates, while simultaneously activating the fat-burning pathways through timing and specific food compounds. This is what the protocol section will lay out precisely. Doorway 3, extinguishing beta cell inflammation, calling off the fire. Here's what I see underestimated constantly, even by people who understand the first 2 doorways. Even if you drain the ectopic fat, even if AMPK is activated, if the inflammatory environment surrounding your beta cells remains high, those cells cannot complete their restoration. The molecular machinery of recovery cannot operate in a sustained state of inflammation. Here's the analogy that clarifies this immediately. Imagine a repair crew arriving to rebuild a structure, but while they're working, someone keeps throwing gasoline on the building. The crew's tools are intact, their skills are intact, but they cannot make net progress because the damage is outpacing the repair. That is what chronic systemic inflammation does to recovering beta cells. It produces inflammatory cytokines, interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, C-reactive protein, that directly impair beta cell signaling and insulin production, even when the fat environment is improving. Certain polyphenol-rich compounds, and I will be precise about which ones in the protocol, have demonstrated direct anti-inflammatory effects, specifically on pancreatic tissue. They essentially suppress the inflammatory signals that are preventing the repair crew from doing its work. You need all three doorways, not just one or two. The protocol I'm about to give you targets all three simultaneously. That is why it works when isolated approaches fail. Here's exactly what day one looks like. These are the interventions I would recommend to a patient sitting across from me in a clinic setting today. Morning primer, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock a.m., before anything else. Take 1 tablespoon of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, diluted in 8 ounces of room temperature water. Drink it before your first meal. The active compound is acetic acid, which reduces the rate at which your stomach empties into your small intestine, directly slowing the speed at which glucose enters your bloodstream after eating. A study published in Diabetes Care showed this single intervention reduced post-meal glucose spikes by up to 34% in people with insulin resistance. This is not a folk remedy. This is a documented glycemic response modification. One important preparation note: never drink apple cider vinegar straight. Always dilute it. Straight acetic acid can damage tooth enamel and esophageal tissue over time. Dilution preserves the effect and eliminates the risk. Breakfast, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock a.m. The AMPK-Activating meal. Half cup rolled oats, not instant. Instant oats are pre-processed and spike glucose significantly faster. Cooked in water. Half teaspoon Ceylon cinnamon, not cassia cinnamon, which contains coumarin, a compound linked to liver stress at higher doses. Ceylon cinnamon contains compounds that activate GLUT4 transporters and have been shown across multiple studies to reduce fasting blood glucose by 10.29% when used consistently. Stir it directly into the oats while hot. 1 tablespoon ground flaxseed stirred in. Soluble fiber that forms a gel in your gut, physically slowing glucose absorption from the meal. 2 soft-boiled eggs on the side. Egg yolks contain choline, chromium, and biotin, all of which play direct roles in insulin receptor sensitivity. This breakfast is designed to give you sustained energy, minimal glucose spike, and 2 AMPK activating compounds before 9 a.m. Mid-morning, 10 o'clock, 10:30 a.m. Anti-inflammatory pathway. Brew 2 cups of green tea at 175 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not use boiling water. The high temperature degrades the catechin compounds that make this intervention work. Specifically, the EGCG in green tea has been shown to reduce pancreatic inflammatory markers and activate AMPK independently of berberine. Drink both cups between breakfast and lunch. If you have access to berberine supplement, 500 milligrams, taken 20 minutes before your largest meal of the day. This is the most evidence-dense, mechanism-confirmed supplement in the metabolic disease space. It is available at most pharmacies and health food stores. If you're already on metformin, speak with your physician before adding berberine. The combined effect on blood glucose can be significant, and your medication may need adjustment. Establish your eating window, starting today. Noon to 8 p.m. This is an 8-hour eating window, creating a 16-hour daily period during which your body, once it clears its immediate glycogen stores, begins mobilizing stored fat for energy, including the ectopic fat sitting in and around your liver and pancreas. You are not skipping meals. You are shifting when they occur. That distinction matters because it means the protocol is sustainable from day one. Lunch, 12 p.m. Bitter melon protocol. Half cup cooked bitter melon, available at Asian grocery stores, sometimes labeled as bitter gourd. Bitter melon contains 2 bioactive compounds, charentin and polypeptide P, which function as plant-based analogs to insulin, stimulating glucose uptake in cells through insulin-independent mechanisms. Large serving of non-starchy vegetables, leafy greens, cucumber, bell pepper, zucchini. 1 tablespoon extra virgin olive oil used as dressing slows gastric emptying, further reducing post-meal glucose response. 4.5 ounces wild-caught salmon or sardines. Omega-3 fatty acids have demonstrated direct anti-inflammatory effects on pancreatic tissue in preclinical studies, targeting exactly the inflammatory environment described in Doorway 3. If you cannot find bitter melon, substitute half cup of cooked lentils, one of the lowest glycemic index legumes, which provide resistant starch that feeds beneficial gut bacteria and reduces hepatic glucose output. Afternoon, 3 p.m. Fenugreek seed water. The night before day 1 begins, soak 1 tablespoon of fenugreek seeds in 6 ounces of water overnight. By afternoon, the water has absorbed the seed's soluble fiber, forming a lightly thickened gel-like liquid. Drink this 30-45 minutes before your dinner. The mechanism. Fenugreek soluble fiber creates a viscous barrier in your small intestine that physically slows glucose absorption at your next meal. Research from the Indian Council of Medical Research tracked this intervention over 8 weeks in patients with type 2 diabetes and documented an average 25% reduction in fasting blood glucose from baseline. The effect compounds over time. Dinner, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock p.m. The inflammation reset. 4.5 ounces wild-caught salmon, or sardines or mackerel, all high omega-3 anti-inflammatory. 1 cup steamed broccoli. Sulforaphane, the compound released when broccoli is chewed and lightly cooked, not boiled, steaming 3 to 4 minutes preserves it, has been shown in recent research from the Karolinska Institute to inhibit hepatic glucose production. Your liver is one of the primary drivers of fasting blood sugar. Sulforaphane tells it to stop dumping excess glucose into your bloodstream when you're at rest. Half cup cooked lentils, fiber, resistant starch, low glycemic impact. No starches, no grains at dinner on day 1 specifically. You want the lowest possible glycemic load in the hours closest to your fasting window. 8 p.m., eating window closes. Non-negotiable. Nighttime eating spikes insulin at precisely the moment your cells are least sensitive to it. Insulin resistance follows a circadian rhythm, peaking in the evening hours. Eating after 8 p.m. actively undermines the fat clearance pathways you spent all day building. This is where most people lose the game. Not during the day, but after dark. One of the biggest reasons people abandon protocols like this is that they don't know what to expect and when. They try something for 2 weeks, feel uncertain about whether it's working, and quit, often right before the point where measurable change would have appeared. Let me give you an honest, research-based timeline of what is actually happening inside your body as you maintain this protocol. Day 1, the shift begins internally. You will not feel dramatic change. You may feel a modest reduction in the energy crash after meals, but internally, acetic acid is modifying your post-meal glucose curve. AMPK is being activated by Ceylon cinnamon, green tea, and the fasting window. Your beta cells are experiencing a reduction in glucose demand, perhaps for the first time in years. Autophagy is beginning in pancreatic tissue within 18-24 hours of initiating the eating window. Nothing to see, everything changing. Week 2nd, first measurable signals. Fasting blood glucose typically begins dropping, modestly, in the range of 5.20 points in most people, depending on baseline. If you have a glucometer and you've been tracking, this is where the first encouraging numbers usually appear. Insulin demand on your pancreas is measurably decreasing. The inflammatory markers that have been bathing your beta cells in hostility are beginning to trend down. Week 6th, the inflection point. This is where the intervention starts becoming visible in lab work. Insulin sensitivity improvements become detectable. Post-meal glucose spikes are lower and shorter in duration. Some people under physician supervision begin reducing medication dosage at this stage, not because they decided to, but because their blood sugar numbers are no longer justifying the previous dose. C-reactive protein, the systemic inflammation marker, typically shows a measurable decline around the 4-8-week mark when the protocol is consistent. Month 3, the recovery window. For a significant proportion of people who maintain the protocol consistently, a 1C shows clinically meaningful reduction. Pancreatic fat clearance becomes detectable on imaging in those who are being monitored. C-peptide testing, which directly measures how much insulin your beta cells are producing, begins showing recovery in many cases. This is not guaranteed for everyone. It is the documented trajectory for people who maintain this level of consistency. Results vary based on how long you've had the diagnosis, your current level of ectopic fat, your overall inflammatory load, and how tightly you adhere to the protocol. But the biology says the window is open. The only question is whether you walk through it. Here are 4 things I find myself telling metabolic patients consistently that most people never hear in a standard clinical visit. Pearl 1. Sequence your eating around movement, not just the clock. Your muscle cells are most insulin sensitive in the 2 hours following physical activity. A 15-minute walk after dinner, not before, not 2 hours after, is one of the most powerful post-meal glucose interventions available. Your muscles act as a glucose sink precisely when you need them most. Research has shown this timing independently reduces post-dinner glucose spikes by over 20%, completely separate from any dietary change. This costs you nothing. It requires no equipment. You can start tonight. Pearl 2. The sequence inside a meal matters as much as the meal itself. Research from Weill Cornell Medical College demonstrated that eating vegetables and protein before the carbohydrate component of the same meal reduced post-meal glucose spikes by up to 37%. Same food, same total amount, different order, dramatically different blood sugar response. Eat your salad first. Eat your protein second. If there are carbohydrates in the meal, they come last. This one change requires no willpower, no new foods, and no cost. It is pure sequencing. Use it every single meal. Pearl 3. Track glucose, not weight, as your primary metric. The scale will not tell you that your pancreatic fat is clearing. It will not tell you that your insulin sensitivity is improving. It will not tell you that your C-peptide is recovering. What it will do is mislead you at the exact moment you need encouragement most. If you have a standard glucometer, and I recommend you get one if you don't, measure your fasting glucose every morning and your post-meal glucose 2 hours after each meal for the first 2 weeks. You will discover which foods are actually driving your glucose highest. You may be shocked. I have seen patients spike dramatically higher on healthy brown rice than on sweet potatoes. Individual glucose response varies significantly. The only way to know yours is to measure it. Get a C-peptide test through your physician at the 3-month mark. This directly quantifies what your beta cells are producing. It is the closest thing to a direct measurement of your pancreas recovering. Pearl 4. Cortisol is an invisible blood sugar drug. Psychological stress triggers the release of cortisol, which directly instructs the liver to release stored glucose into the bloodstream, a survival mechanism left over from when stress meant physical danger. If your protocol is excellent and your numbers are not improving, this is what I look at first. Chronic work stress, poor sleep, unresolved anxiety. These can override almost every dietary intervention through direct hormonal mechanisms. 7 hours of sleep minimum is not a lifestyle preference. It is a metabolic intervention. Sleep deprivation alone can raise fasting blood glucose by 15.23% in otherwise healthy adults within 2 days. These are the 3 patterns I see most consistently undermine people who are genuinely trying to implement dietary change for diabetes reversal. Saboteur 1. Eating diabetic-friendly processed foods. The sugar-free, diabetic-approved label on grocery store packaging is one of the most misleading certifications in food marketing. Sugar-free products are frequently sweetened with maltitol, sorbitol, or other sugar alcohols that still raise blood glucose in some individuals more sharply than table sugar, while simultaneously causing significant digestive disruption. Here is the only label that matters to you: total carbohydrates per serving. Not net carbs, not sugar-free claims, total carbohydrates. If that number is high, the package labeling is irrelevant. The glucose response doesn't care about the marketing. The safest rule: if it came in a package and has 4 diabetics on the label, it should raise more suspicion, not less. Saboteur 2. Exercising without understanding timing. Exercise is metabolically powerful for blood sugar management, but not all exercise at all times. High-intensity exercise, first thing in the morning in a fasted state, when cortisol is already elevated, can paradoxically raise blood glucose in people with insulin resistance through cortisol-mediated hepatic glucose release. This confuses people who are doing everything right and watching their morning numbers go up. The most effective timing for metabolic benefit is moderate intensity movement, walking, resistance training, cycling, in the 30-60-minute window after a meal. This is when insulin is already elevated from eating, muscle cells are primed for glucose uptake, and the combination produces the most efficient blood sugar clearance. Timing your exercise around meals, not just fitting it in whenever, changes its impact substantially. Saboteur 3, expecting consistent linear progress. Blood glucose does not improve in a straight line. It improves in a trend over time, with daily and weekly variation caused by sleep, stress, hydration, illness, hormonal fluctuation, and dozens of other variables. People who are watching their numbers daily and expecting a consistent downward march will hit a plateau week or see an unexpected spike and conclude the protocol isn't working, often at exactly the moment the underlying biology is actually making meaningful progress. This is not motivational messaging. This is mechanistic reality. The pancreatic fat clearance happening in week 3 is not visible on a fasting glucose reading that morning. The beta cell recovery happening in week 6 will not announce itself on a given Tuesday. Trust the protocol, track the trend, measure your A1C at 3 months, not your fasting glucose at 3 weeks, as your ultimate arbiter of progress. Consistency over perfection, measured over the right time horizon, is what the research supports. If what you heard in this video changed the way you understand what's possible with type 2 diabetes, please send it to someone who needs it. More than 537 million adults worldwide are living with diabetes right now. Most of them have been told the same incomplete story. Manage it, slow it, accept it. The information in this video is not experimental. It is published, peer-reviewed science. But it is not what most people are hearing in a 15-minute clinical appointment. The only way that gap closes is through conversations like this one. And if you want to go deeper, I have a full video dedicated to the specific foods most diabetics eat every day that are quietly driving glucose higher than almost anything else in their diet. The list might surprise you. It surprised me when I first looked at the data. Until then, this is Dr. Leana. You have more information now than most people will ever receive in a standard clinical setting. Put it to work, one day at a time. Your pancreas is waiting.